In the last section, we started recreating our login form mostly from scratch. So we can see some inputs and buttons on the form, but there's absolutely no logic behind them right now, nothing to actually log the user in. So in this section, we're going to start to focus more on making this login form work nicely with Redux. So this is going to be the part where if anything about Redux is still a little bit hazy, this is where I'm going to start to just really hammer it into your head as best I can. The process that we're about to go through here of making a form that works well with Redux, we're going to repeat once again in this application. So the first time, if it doesn't still make sense, we're going to have another shot at it later on in this application. So again, just going to keep hammering in the same topics over and over again to make sure they're crystal clear. So let's talk about exactly how this form is going to work with Redux. So this diagram here is the interaction between React and Redux. It's like the full story. This is the entire flow. So we start off at the top left up here. We're going to have an input on the screen, and a user is going to type something. Now previously we had an event handler on that input, and we said, okay, yeah, a user just typed something. Let's take that new value. Let's set our state, and yeah, you know what? That's all we need to worry about. So this time around, now that we're using Redux, things are going to be very similar, but a little bit more complicated at the same time, just because we're involving Redux as well. So when a user types something, instead of immediately calling setState and saving that new value as component level state, we're going to instead call an action creator with this new text. Remember, an action creator is how we invoke some change inside our application. You can loosely think of an action creator not entirely unlike a call to set state. I would get whipped for saying that by some folks, but I'm going to make the claim vaguely similar to calling set state. I'm just going to say it. This action creator will create an action with a new text and a very specific action type. Right, so that's our action. The action creator makes an action. That action is sent to all the different reducers in our application. Each reducer will calculate a new application state for that very particular slice of state for that very particular reducer. Redux is going to take the output from each reducer that we have. It's going to form it up into a single object, which we kind of colloquially refer to as state. It's going to send that off to all the different components. All of the components will re-render with new state. There we go. All of our components will re-render with a new state. And then we just sit back and wait for the changes. We wait for the user to type another character, in which case we repeat the entire process all over again. So this is the flow that we're going to go through every single time that a user types something into our form. Before, it was just, okay, a user types something, call set state, and then in the render method, we pass the value of the input as that piece of state, this.state.email or this.state.pass or whatever it might have been. But now that we're using Redux, we wait for the user to type something, we update our application level state, we pass that application level state back into the component, and we tell the the input, here's your value, and then we sit back and wait for the new change again. So very similar flow to what we had before as far as handling text input. The difference is we're handling it at the application state level. Now, if you weren't saying this before, I really bet you're saying it now. Steven, oh my God, why? Why are we doing this? Why do we have to do these 5 steps? Because what I'm telling you right now is that we're going to make an action creator to handle text updates. We're going to make a reducer that's going to handle whatever the user is typing, and then we're going to have to make a map state to props function to pass that state back to the component. So I am saying here that we're going to do probably 3 or 4 times as much code as just doing that single set state call. That is what I'm saying here. And so you're probably thinking, why would we do that? This seems so over the top complicated. And my response to you is, well, you know what? Yeah, for this very simple case that we're doing here, for just a simple text input, yes, it is quite complicated. But you know what? As we start to get really complex forms, this is the key part. As we start to get really complex forms, say a wizard type form, like a multi-page wizard, right? or anytime that we have to do a lot of validation, or anytime we have to like take some user input and then do like maybe an AJAX request to validate that it's a valid username or something like that. Anytime that we want to start introducing complexity here, this approach is going to be a lot easier for adding complexity on as opposed to that single set state call. All right, so that is why we're doing this. It is because even though this makes things a little bit more challenging for our simple applications, for complex applications, this makes life a lot easier. All right, and so as you're starting to use React and Redux on your personal projects, I got to tell you, you want to reach for React and Redux when you're working on a complicated project. That is when you want to reach for these frameworks. Okay, anyways, enough soapboxing for a little bit. Maybe I can stop lecturing for 2 minutes so we can write some actual code. We're going to get started with step 1 of that form, which is watching for a user to type something, and when they do, we want to call an action creator. Okay, so that's our goal right now. I want to watch for a user to type something, and when they type something, I want to call an action creator. So we know how to watch for a user to type something. We can pass the input tag a onChangeText event handler. So I'm going to pass onChangeText, a callback of this.onEmailChange. And because it is a callback where we are going to make reference to this, I'm going to bind the context over here. So then we'll add that event handler in as a method. So onEmailChange. And this will be called with the new text. Okay. So just to be really clear here, I said, yeah, our components are going to be so stupid, they're not going to have any logic at all. And that's totally true. They're not going to have a lot of logic, but we still do have to write this like glue code, these event handlers. Now I could write just pass a fat arrow function directly to this prop here. For this first component we're working on, I'm going to just start off with a separate helper function just to keep things nice and clear, keep the JSX in here like very clear. Then inside of here, we're going to want to call an action creator so that we can update our application level state with the new value that the user has typed in. Okay, so that's our goal. We don't have any action creators yet, so we're going to make a new folder for our action creators, and we're going to just kind of scaffold out an action for right now. So inside my source directory, I'm going to make a new folder called actions, and then inside of there we will make a new file called index.js. And then finally inside of this file we'll make a new action creator. So I'll say export const email changed. This thing will be called with some amount of text, and whenever it gets called, I want to return an action. Remember, an action is a plain JavaScript object. It always has a type property, which is going to be a string. And I'm going to make it just email changed. And we'll give it a payload of text because we want to communicate the new text that was provided. Again, I do have a little bit of an ESLint here from unexpected block statement. I'm going to show you, I'm really getting tired of this this error here because we're really not respecting this one, and this would really be well suited for having the more compact syntax. But I feel like in a tutorial, I'd like having the kind of longer form. So in the next section, I'm going to show you how to turn this error message off if you want to disable it. But let's stay on track for right now. So we just created our action creator. We can now import it back into this file. And then we will import the connect helper and wire it up as an action creator to the component. So let's take care of that in the next section.